Hello, everyone. Welcome to the YouTube channel. It's me, David Chen, and joining me today is Dan Gvozden. Dan, how are you this evening?
I'm good, man. It was a long weekend with Labor Day, so I'm kind of settling into the week. But I think if you were to kind of talk to me offhandedly, you might think I was a zombie because I'm a little bit out of it, but I'm ready to get into this new episode of What If, and potentially eat some brains along the way if possible.
Welcome to our weekly recap of Marvel's What If, streaming right now on Disney Plus. Every week on the YouTube channel, we recap and spoil this week's episode of What If. This week we'll be discussing season 1, episode 5, What If Zombies is the name of the whole episode. The YouTube version of this broadcast can always be found on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/DaveChensky. And if you want the audio podcast version, patreon.com/DaveChen is where you can sign up to get that and find more of Dan's work at amazingspidertalk.com. Now, last week on this broadcast, we broached the idea of not continuing this podcast and this recap show. And a lot of people said they really enjoy it, and I appreciate all the people that came out. But yeah, I mean, the the number of views is still not as high as like any of our other shows, so I'm still kind of weighing it. No need to comment though. I'm not like fishing for comments or whatever. But like, for now, we're gonna keep doing it, and we'll see if we change our minds. We'll let people know. But appreciate everyone commenting and letting us know their appreciation of these recaps. It means a lot, particularly my patrons over at patreon.com/DaveChen.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say, David, if there are updates on this, we'll probably put it in the comments or in the notes about the episode so people can follow along if it goes anywhere else or
Yeah,
anything like that. And also to say that I think, if even if we stop for this show, it doesn't
right,
mean we're never going to do something like this ever again.
right. I mean, I would like to work with Dan as long as he is not tired of working with me. So, um,
Hope springs eternal for Dave's love of Hawkeye.
oh man, I forgot. That's something we might need to recap. Okay, there were a couple of comments as well I wanted to get to in response to last week's episode, in which we recapped the what if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands. I had mentioned on that episode that there was a Twitter interaction with David Batista in which Dave Batista said that he was not asked to voice Drax. Well, according to Christopher Yeeman, who commented on last week's episode, there was a follow up on the Drax controversy. The showrunner of What If said they did try to contact him. There was lost communication. He never got their message, and they never got back to him. So they actually did. There was no intention to slam Dave Batista. It was just a miscommunication. I think many people reading this might think like, "Wow, that's ridiculous. How could you miss out on an opportunity like voicing Drax in What If, a major Marvel series?" And I think this kind of stuff happens all the time. It's hard to get in touch with people in general. You know?
I guess I see that. I don't know. I used to work as someone that booked talent for movie screenings and stuff, and I've never really had an agent ghost me before. And I'm not Marvel Studios, so I don't know. I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge on this. I'm just providing my own anecdote, which is I don't know. That sounds like a little bit weird still to me.
I think it's you know, there's when you're dealing with stars of Dave Bautista's caliber, there's just a lot of intermediaries. You know, there's like an
Yeah.
agent and a manager, and I don't know about you, but like let's say I'm trying to reach out to someone to have them guest on a podcast of mine, right? I might Twitter DM them, I might go through their people, whatever, and sometimes they just ghost me. Sometimes they just literally, I'm like, they said, yes, I would love to participate in the podcast. Amazing. Or I'm so and so's agent. I'd love to participate in the podcast, blah, 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 blah. And then we get to the end, and then they literally just ghost me. And like, I never hear from them again. This stuff happens all the time. And sometimes you're not even confident that your message actually got through. Like, it's hard to know whether the person in question actually heard it. So this to me actually seems very plausible. But seems like it was miscommunication, not an intentional diss of Drax. The other
Truly, the
thing,
world will never know.
Indeed. The other thing is Henry Chow commented last week. We had mentioned like a hemispherectomy, and I think on last week's episode we had said that like a hemispherectomy is like severing the two parts of the brain. Henry Chow points out that a hemispherectomy is the removal of half the brain. A corpus callostomy is the cutting of the bridge between the hemispheres, creating two brains. So, apologies for the mess up in medical terminology, but I think in the show it was the term hemispherectomy was used. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, it was, and I may have classified it incorrectly, but I think the point remains, or my point being that it was a thematic allusion to something that would be happening later in the show, and in many ways, like that definition of hemispherectomy, rather than the one maybe I provided, I think is even more accurate, which is that Doctor Strange literally had the two parts of him not just separated but removed and into a different being.
Right,
So,
right.
um, you know, uh, forget the specific verbiage, but take the spirit of my comment. How about that?
Indeed, indeed. Okay, so Dan Gvosdin, let's talk about this week's episode, season 1, episode 5, entitled "What If Zombies." Let's talk about overall thoughts. What were your overall thoughts on this episode?
I kind of feel about this episode how I feel about this episode's title, which is it's the least creative of the bunch. And it's really just an opportunity to have zombies in it. It's this is the kind of quintessential what if story. It's like kind of fun, but completely inconsequential. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, at least for now. I thought it was kind of a mindless. And I'm probably going to make a bunch of like zombie puns, just like Ant-Man here. But to me, it was almost like a Mad Libs adventure. It's like this happens, then this happens, and there's very little thematic consequence or character building. With some nice moments sprinkled in here and there. But I don't know. I just didn't think there was a lot of meat on the bones here. There's not really a lot of like interesting or new ideas done with the zombie concept, other than kind of rehashing that kind of heroes versus heroes formula, which we've kind of already seen a bunch of in What If, and not to mention the MCU proper. And that can be fun, right? Like it's cool to see some of these B characters get a spotlight to do cool things, and it's neat to see all these returning voice actors, which still remains kind of thrilling. But I just the tone was all over the place, and I just don't think the ideas were really quite as up to snuff. And the what if of it all was not as clear. Like I know that there's this whole, we'll get into how the zombie virus comes, but it just doesn't really feel like a natural extension of what came before, more than it is just like a reason to have zombies now.
Well, I think that one of the things you said early on in our conversations about the show was that the thing that makes What If interesting is it's kind of like sliding doors, right? Like
Right.
it's like if you made a different decision here, like what would have happened? And as the show has gone on, it's basically gotten like farther and farther. I mean, episode 1 was really the only episode that truly lived up to that premise, if I recall correctly. Like episode 1 was like if Sharon Carter had stayed in the room, but then there was if and I guess to some degree like the T'Challa Star-Lord one as well, because like that was a Yondu decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then so many other things of that episode were like outlandish, and we talked last week about the Doctor Strange. Depends on this whole absolute point, whatever that didn't exist in the original episode, and so it really feels like. What was the other episode, by the way? What was the third What If?
You're
There's a
thinking the
murder
Doctor
mystery.
Strange, the murder mystery.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was kind of interesting as well, in the sense that, but again, it wasn't really like somebody made a different decision, right? It was kind of like Hope in that episode. Hope Van Dyne dies, right, and then like that propels Hank Pym into a whole revenge saga. By the way, way more Hank Pym in this series than I originally would have thought. Like, Hank Pym is apparently extremely critical to a lot of the stuff that might have happened in the multiverse. But
That was
I
absolutely the first thought I had when Hank Pym showed up in
I was
this.
like,
I was
wow,
like, "Whoa, they're doubling down on
Hank
this."
Pym is so consequential in the What If verse.
Who
But
knew?
yeah, I think as the show has gone on, it's like it's not really that interested in this whole sliding doors concept. I think it's more like, here, let's just imagine a whole different set of things happening, and that's kind of cool. But I think you and I were both intrigued at the idea of like, oh man, if it was just like a single decision, right? Whereas here in this episode, What If Zombies, it's not really a single decision. It's more like, you know, what if Michelle Pfeiffer was a zombie, basically?
Right.
I
I mean,
mean, yeah.
to the sliding doors of it all, I think the fun of those stories is that the characters remain the characters you know, but you're seeing them, make a different choice that maybe changes their character and then allows you to compare, you know, like even if there's a change, the original remains a shadow in the background of your mind the whole time you're watching it, and so you can see what those differences are and how the butterfly effect concept works, and you're always comparing them to the original. This happens too whenever a like villain takes over the role of a hero in the Marvel universe. Doctor Octopus becomes Spider-Man. Well, Peter Parker might not be in the story, but everything is a comparison to Peter, and so he exists there in the background. But a story like this is so divorced from how you know it. You can get some nice character beats that reflect back on the characters, and I think it's strongest when it does that. For example, I think the Vision stuff in this episode was kind of neat, but for the most part, there's no one-to-one to compare it to here.
So, All in the Game says in that episode that I was referring to, it's when Fury sent Hope to Odessa, Ukraine instead of Natasha. That was the sliding doors concept in that episode. Javik12 says, I think episode 3 was the choice of Hope joining S.H.I.E.L.D. So, yeah, I think this brings up a good point, which is you could argue, right, that in episode 3, it was a single decision, right? Like it was this decision of Nick Fury sends Hope Van Dyne or whatever, or Hope joining Shield and then going to Ukraine, whatever. I think the show is most interesting though, or would be most interesting if like the decision was thematically resonant in some way. Like you could argue for episode 1 that Sharon Carter staying in the room is like showing some kind of boldness that then is then
Right.
reflected on the idea that she becomes the first Avenger, right? And so I think what I'm learning as we watch the show is like a sliding doors that's interesting is not just what if a character zigged instead of zagged. It's what if they zigged instead of zagged in a way that was thematically interesting or interesting for their character, like right, that was like resonant in some way with what we know about that person. But thank you for the call outs. I think those are very fair. All in the Game and Javik in the chat room. So
Well, let me ask you, David. I'm kind of defining something based on how I know it to be in the comics and what I've enjoyed of the show so far. Do you think that sliding doors concept is the superior one, or do you enjoy these kind of like alt universe, like fully changed, like different concept altogether episodes? Which is to say, also, what did you think of this episode?
So I do think this the sliding doors with a thematically resonant decision is the more interesting kind of what if. But we're now 5 episodes into this show, uh, so we're about like halfway through the season, and I feel like um, we are now getting a sense of kind of what kinds of stories they want to tell. And here is how I'm thinking about the whole show: is this is a way primarily for Marvel to explore other genres that it hasn't explored. So we have like murder mystery genre. In this case, we have like zombie horror genre. Um, and and last episode was like kind of like a horror movie esque genre, the Doctor Strange one, right? And I think that's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting and refreshing. So that's one thing that I want to call out. The other thing is that the other thing that I really appreciate is it's kind of almost like you're taking the characters from the Avengers, throwing them into like a toy box and like shaking them up, and then just pulling out a random group of them and then like having them fight each other or play with each other or whatever. And you're showing them in permutations that we've never seen them before, and a lot of the times with the original voice actors, and it's kind of fun to see them bounce off each other and see like, oh, how would these different characters use their powers? How would their personalities bounce off each other? That's fun. So for me, it does live up to the name and the premise, which is like, hey, here's some mental exercises around what would happen if circumstances were different. Can it go beyond that? Can it go beyond just like, hey, what if da da da? I don't know if that's true. I don't think it has really gone beyond that yet. It has not transcended the premise, in my opinion. It has not been like a thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to watch What If. It's so good. It's so much better than the premise would even hint at. You know, like it doesn't rise to that level for me. But in terms of scratching my curiosity itch, I think it does work for that. And it also makes me think about like, what are ways in which this What If makes sense and where it doesn't make sense. You know, like. Anyway, let's dive into the episode. How about that?
Sure, sounds fine.
So the episode opens with the same opening as Infinity War, where you have Mark Ruffalo beaming to Earth from the ship. I think it was what's his name, Idris Elba's character,
Heimdall.
Heimdall, like sent him to Earth from the Thor ship, basically at the beginning of Infinity War, right?
Right, correct.
And it's what's kind of cool is you see like him like have literally the shots from Infinity War of like New York City with the tilting camera and like Hulk going into the staircase, and you know you see like the exact same shots are recreated in animation, but obviously the whole circumstance of the city is different. And I thought that's kind of cool. You know, it's kind of fun to recognize a setting and a situation that we already know.
I also enjoyed that this is the first one that's like this far along in the timeline. Like I think we've been really focused on like early Marvel, and now we're really like kind of diving into late era Marvel. And in that regard, it was kind of cool to see the show kind of catch up and jump around like that.
Tell us about Marvel Zombies, which presumably might have been one of the inspirations for this episode.
Yeah, sure. So of course, like when Mark Ruffalo's Hulk or Bruce Banner gets there, we suddenly find out that there are zombies everywhere, which the title informed us. There was a series called Marvel Zombies written by The Walking Dead's Robert Kirkman, back when he used to write for Marvel during his kind of, I guess, short-ish time at Marvel before he went to creator-owned comics, and his story imagined this alternate dimension where, our alternate universe where there was a zombie plague that basically took over Earth in the Marvel universe, and there were a group of survivors led by Magneto, against largely the Avengers as zombies who retained their intellect kind of like they do here, although they can still talk, but just have this kind of like endless hunger to eat and devour everything. We meet Spider-Man and find out that he devoured Mary Jane and Aunt May, and it's both funny and grotesque in like I think all the best ways a zombie movie can be. It's a really fun thing, and it went on for not only his book but then like a sequel and several other books, and it became this really hot thing where every Marvel comic that year had a zombie cover, and we're still seeing that stuff. So the idea of zombies and Marvel are not two very distinct things. It's been popular for quite some time, and a lot of elements in this episode draw comparisons to Robert Kirkman's story in superficial ways.
It sounds like one of the key elements is that they retain their powers. This to me felt like cheating, you know? What I not cheating in the show's part, but just like in general, when we see zombies, there's a trade-off, right?
Right.
The trade-off of a zombie is the character can rise from the dead, so like death is not a factor for them, but they retain like none of their personality or special abilities from before. Instead, they're like a shambling corpse. But in this case, it appears like if you had superpowers before you became a zombie, you retain those powers afterwards.
Right.
Which it sounds like is an invention of Robert Kirkman, or is an element of Robert Kirkman's work in the Marvel Zombies comic, but also obviously something that is partially retained here. And to me, it's like, okay, that's just like those things are way overpowered. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
I think it works better in the comic than it does here. Because they still have their own twisted versions of their
hmm
personalities.
hmm
And yeah, maybe they're not doing enough with the zombie stuff, but like it goes so grotesque. And like one of the first images is Magneto chopping the top of Captain America's head off to reveal his brain, um, you know, with his own shield. So it leans much more into the zombie horrorness and
hmm
grotesqueness, and it's much more Evil Dead than it is here.
Yeah.
It's got that cosmic Marvel thing mixed with Evil Dead, and there was even, I believe, like an Evil Dead crossover with it. So tonally, that's where it's at, and I don't think that that's quite like these zombies don't really come with the genre flair alongside them, which I think is actually really disappointing because I would have liked this episode to either be more scary or more funny, and so it's
hmm
kind of caught somewhere in the middle.
You don't think it landed the Shaun of the Dead balance of those two tones, Dan
No,
Kavossi?
I don't, but I think that's a really precarious thing to try to pull off.
Victor Di Giovanni in the chat says, I still think this is all leading to some team up of these characters. The League of Extraordinary Variants. Captain Carter, T'Challa Star-Lord, Evil Doctor Strange, Scott, Langhead, and Clokey. What do you think?
I do agree.
It's possible. It's
I think
possible.
we're moving towards a team up, especially at the way that this episode concludes. But we can get to that later.
So what's also funny is, in this universe, I guess, right? What happened is Earth got taken over by zombies, but that news did not reach Thanos, so his Dark Order still shows up on Earth. But then, like, zombie versions of like Iron Man show up, and like they're eating the Dark Order basically, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah, the Black Order. Yeah.
The Black Order, sorry. And so we find out that several of the Avengers have survived, the Wasp, Spider-Man, and then we get the backstory of like Hank Pym going back and bringing back like a zombie diseased Michelle Pfeiffer, and so on. Then we see like a video blog that Spider-Man did about like what the rules are to survive the apocalypse. Um, I there's some question for me and also you, I think, about like whether the video blog, because I think this is similar to what the video was it Homecoming or was it Far From Home where there was the video blog? I think
It's in
it's in
Homecoming.
Homecoming. Okay.
Homecoming opens with the video blog.
Okay, so this is theoretically he's already made the Homecoming video blog. This is
Correct.
after the events of Homecoming, right?
Correct.
So he's just really into video blogs or vlogs or what have you. And I think there's some debate about like would it really be this upbeat given that like the entire planet has been engulfed by zombies.
Yeah, that was my initial thinking upon watching this, which is like, this is a Spider-Man who's ostensibly lost his aunt, all of his friends, everybody in his life to a zombie plague, and is still making kind of jokey moments. And I think I wrote this note in there that like, like this is me being cynical, but that's the MCU Spidey for you because we can't possibly have a character that's racked by guilt. Spider-Man's got to be the jokey guy, which is something I always bristle at because I think the jokes in a good Spider-Man story are his way of kind of like hiding his fear and pushing his guilt down. And maybe you could say that is true here. But I kind of was cynical about it first. But I have to say, the speech that he gives later in the episode about remaining optimistic
Mm-hmm.
made it at least seem in character that like his aunt left this final message for him about being optimistic in the face of doom. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was at least like consistent in that regard. But at first, it really caught me off guard that he would be behaving as such.
I think that's completely fair. They also introduced this character or reintroduced this character of Kurt. I had no idea who the heck this was. Can you explain who Kurt is?
Yeah, he's a member of the X-Cons, which is that like team of like cons from the Ant-Man movies.
Yeah.
And it's David Demalchain. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's also in Suicide
He's Polka Dot
Squad.
Guy from Suicide
Polka
Squad,
Dot
right?
Man. Yeah, yeah.
Is it the same
Um,
voice actor from Ant-Man?
Yeah, he's also in it, but like it
David
sounds like it.
Dastmalchian. David Dastmalchian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like a fake. It doesn't sound like a real actor is doing it. It sounds like a bad impression of him,
Uh huh.
but it's actually him.
Well, why don't we get to our favorite segment of the show, Dan Kvassen, right now, which is
Hmm.
ranking the sound alike actors for how accurately they recreated the original actor. And in this case, I gotta say, they got almost everyone for this one, right?
Yeah,
They got Jeffrey Wright. They got, well, he's not a character from the thing, but they got Mark Ruffalo. They got Chadwick Boseman. They got Paul Bettany. They got Sebastian Stan. They even got Evangeline Lilly. I didn't know if they would get her for this. They got Paul Rudd. They got Jon Favreau. They got Denai Guerrera. And then Emily Van Camp plays Sharon Carter, which is also somebody who played Sharon Carter in Falcon and Winter Soldier and the original. David Dastmalchian plays Kurt. So there was only two people that they didn't get, right? That was Tom Holland did not play Spider-Man. It was Hudson Thames, right? Or
yeah.
Hudson Thames, as they say it in the UK. And Josh Keaton plays Captain America. Who I think he played him in the other What If episodes as well, right?
The funny thing is, when this episode was first kind of teased, its cast, people saw the name Josh Keaton, and Josh Keaton used to play Spider-Man on the Spectacular Spider-Man animated TV show. So, like at least my part of the internet lit up in excitement because he's a beloved Spider-Man voice actor, thinking that he would voice Spider-Man. But they found someone that's much closer to Tom Holland, I think, than his voice.
Wow. So the guy who plays Steve Rogers, they thought he would play Spider-Man, but he in fact plays Steve Rogers in this episode.
Correct. Yeah.
Amazing.
So it was a bit of a turnaround. It's funny because he had to he couldn't respond to it because of his NDA. So on Twitter he had to be mum about it. But today he came out and said, "Look, just try not to overread into these things or overread into my silence. I have an NDA and I can't say, but no, it wasn't me. But it fooled a lot of people. So kind of an interesting little turn of events for fans online."
Victor Di Giovanni says the Spider-Man voice was the closest sound alike they've gotten so far. I thought it was pretty good, right? Like, as you said, Hudson sounded quite a bit like Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the animation was a little strange. Like it looked like they aged up Spider-Man considerably
Mm-hmm.
in,
Mm-hmm.
in this, but I mean I don't mind an aged up Spider-Man. But it is funny in that like
Yeah, he looks
he
like he's in
looks
his like 20s in this one, right?
right. But the funny thing is like Tom Holland is actually in his 20s.
Yeah,
So
but also Tom
uh,
Holland isn't Spider-Man in the show. So anyway, by
yeah.
the way, All in the Game says they're definitely getting a team up as shot in one of the main trailers. A shot in one of the main trailers has a shot of the new team of Avengers circling up like OG Avengers did. We'll see. That's interesting. That's interesting. Xinyu Zhang says Winter Soldier's voice acting was still not great. I thought Sebastian Stan did a far better job in this episode than he did in the first one.
Yeah, I still think we dumped on him kind of unnecessarily before. Like it was a better performance here, but yeah, I don't know. I think if I wasn't paying as close attention to it because we dumped on him before, it wouldn't have stood out at all.
Agree to disagree. I thought this was markedly better performance. So,
Okay, all right.
all right. So they go to Grand Central Station. They're like, we gotta go to this other place to get the MacGuffin to solve the zombies, right?
Yes, of
And
course.
and the way they're gonna do that is by going to Grand Central Station. There's a huge action scene that unfolds, and some people are killed. Like Happy gets killed, and we see zombie Hawkeye and Falcon show up. I gotta say, like when Hawkeye shows up shooting those arrows, I burned with rage because I think Hawkeye is like one of the most useless characters ever, and the fact that he's like in zombie form inhibiting the actions of these people who are trying to save the world really just I shake my fist at you, Hawkeye.
I think this whole sequence is kind of an example of like where I'm not really able to grab onto the tone. And it's not to say I didn't like a lot of the elements of it. Like there's the whole like blam 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 thing from Happy. And for me, for my money, John Favreau was the kind of like winner of this episode. I really enjoyed like his performance. I thought there was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
life to it. But then when he's like getting dragged off, into the
Well,
darkness and saying
dude gets a
blam, blam,
freaking
blam.
arrow shot through his shoulder. Like
Yeah.
that's like upsetting to think about. And then, gets dragged away into the darkness to presumably be consumed. His flesh get consumed.
But even then, the show is making a joke out of it,
That's what I'm saying.
and
Yeah, I agree. I'm
yeah,
agreeing with you.
yeah. So it's like, I mean, this is the kind of the Marvel thing, right? Which is to always be jokey. And, I think we've seen really the limits of that and what it can do to kind of like flatten the tone a little bit of an episode, or make it less definitive. And in that moment, it really like lessened any fear I might have had about the zombies if the whole thing is playful. And maybe that's the way it's meant to be. But then I think they could have gone even sillier with it if they really wanted to.
There's a fight between Zombie Cap and Sharon Carter. Zombie Cap looks really scary, and Bucky kills him with his own shield, and it's kind of sad. I think there's actually a hilarious moment earlier when Bucky sees Falcon get murdered in front of him, Zombie Falcon, and he's like, "I should feel bad, but I don't," or something like that. And I was just like, "That's how I felt about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the TV show."
Oh
Um,
man.
but yeah, what I thought was interesting here is there appears to be a huge diversity in time, like speed by which someone becomes a zombie. Because Sharon Carter becomes a zombie almost like instantly, as far as I can tell.
Right.
But Hope Van Dyne takes like seemingly hours before she
Well, she's
transforms.
huge, Hope Van Dyne. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes longer for it to course through her system.
So Hope, they arrive at the place. Hope goes giant, carries them over. It's actually like a very lovely sequence. Like she has a noble hero's death. But I think you and I had the same question, which is, Hope, you gotta transform into a small person before you become a zombie, because otherwise you're gonna be zombie giant Hope Van Dyne, and I don't know why no one else thought to bring this up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I also don't know why they didn't like just get the cape to carry them each over one at a time. I mean, maybe they were running out of time, but like, I don't know. It's kind of the like, can't we ride the giant eagles to Mordor?
Right.
Like
If you can, then
we've
there's
had it
no
the whole
show. There's no
time.
show. There's no movie, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so they find Vision, who is immune to zombie bites because he's an android, but also has the Mind Stone that's apparently like repelling these things. And they find Scott Lang in a jar, who has been saved. Did they explain what happened to the rest of his body? Like, I guess like they were able to save him, but only part of him. Like that didn't. I don't think they explained it, right?
No, it didn't register for me. I will say in the comics, Janet Van Dyne is the jar in the or head in the jar, and she even gets like a robot body at some point. So I think that might be the impetus for why they put it like this, other than just like having a really fun Futurama reference. So
Right, because otherwise it's really random. And also, I can't, you know, this is a stupid nitpick what I am about to say.
oh
Okay.
boy, I'm waiting for it here,
But
James.
so do not think this actually, like, I think this actually detracts from the quality of the show in any way. But the idea of heads in jars talking bothers me because heads need air to pass through lungs to come out vocal cords in order to speak. And in Futurama, you could believe it because it's like 1,000 years in the future. But like in this show, which takes place in, I don't know, 2025 or whatever the hell, I don't know if they have that technology yet. Yes, I realize that this is a world where Iron Man exists and Vision is made up of a Mind Stone and so on. But still, guys, come on. Heads in jars. It's very far fetched, is what I'm trying to say.
Hashtag worth it just for the cape and the head flying around together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, uh, Bucky goes to try to find transportation, and then Vision has a cartoonishly ominous statement like, "You're
Yeah.
not gonna find what you're looking for here." Like it's like, okay, I don't know why Bucky still left after that, but he goes and he finds T'Challa with his legs sawed off. And I gotta say, we had discussed earlier on an earlier episode of this that um, Chadwick Boseman was going to be in future episodes of What If, but seeing him in this episode, like he was in an earlier episode, but like seeing him in this episode, actually, honestly, was emotionally difficult for me. I'm not even joking. Like seeing him like kind of his body destroyed, in the table, and then later on he's like he makes some broad pronouncements about like humanity and persevering and stuff like that. Um, I got more emotional at Chadwick Boseman in this episode than I did in the earlier episode, even though that earlier one was like dedicated to him. So yeah, it was hard to see him kind of like in a tough state physically, because of how he passed away in real life. But
Yeah. T'Challa tells Spider-Man, "Death is not the end." Like
yeah, oh
that really hit me. Yeah.
yeah, seriously. So this is apparently a direct reference to something in the comics, finding T'Challa like this, right?
Yeah. So Hank Pym is actually the one in the comics that is got T'Challa all tied up and is eating him. But in the comics, he's got a handsaw and is slowly carving off pieces of him to like save him as like a tender meal over time. So I'm
That's
very
pretty
thankful
messed
that
up,
we
and I'm
didn't
glad
get
they
to
didn't
see
go
it.
that way for the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way they went was already pretty violent, considering this is a pretty bloodless show up to till this point.
Yeah,
So like seeing a leg sawed off to me was like probably about as dark as they were willing to get.
yeah, yeah. So then we find out that the reason T'Challa's all tied up is because Vision has been feeding body parts of the Avengers, I guess. T'Challa couldn't just be a random stranger. It had to be an Avenger to Scarlet Witch, who he is trying to keep contained in this facility, right? Which brings me to my next point. I think the Wanda Vision partnership / romance is a net negative for humanity. What do you think?
I think that's a fair call. But at this point, humanity doesn't really have many like deeper places it could sink.
Indeed. Indeed. I mean, it's just like between WandaVision, where she like mentally tortures a whole town, to now they're sawing off parts of Black Panther to keep her alive, to keep their romance alive. It's feels like we don't want superheroes to fall. Everyone's like, "Where's all the sex in Marvel movies?" It's like, you know what? I've seen it. I don't need to see any more of it. That's kind of
This
where I'm at.
this is the much darker ending of Shaun of the Dead, where he's got his friend tied up in the cabin.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, what happens? They basically escape. Vision has an extremely quick character turn where he's like, "Okay, I must atone for my sins. Here is the Mind Stone, but I'm not leaving. I'm dying here." There's some cool action beats. I like the Vision like heat ray visioning the entire base. Like that was kind of cool. And then they fly off to Wakanda, where they're going to broadcast the Mind Stone thing. And that's when T'Challa has that line that you say, and so on. But then they don't give you the happy ending. We see an ominous shot of what appears to be zombies at the gates of Wakanda, at the force field of Wakanda. And then a shot of zombie Thanos with all the Infinity Stones. And in the show notes, you write non-ending. They don't get to broadcast the signal. Plus zombie Thanos ? What? So I ask you, Dan Gvosden's zombie Thanos. What?
I mean, first of all, I thought this was the most abrupt ending of all of the episodes.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, give us false hope, give us bleak, don't give us nothing. When it stopped, I was like, is that really the end of the episode? I almost couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then we suddenly get zombie Thanos, which like you have to do some kind of like hop, skip, and a jump logic of like, oh, I guess Thanos came to Earth eventually and then succumbed to zombie plague. But it's like, well, there's a number of leaps there, which is like the Mind Stone thing. I mean, I don't know. I have to go back and look at it more carefully, but like, I don't know. I just don't see Thanos getting bit by something. I mean, perhaps. Okay, but there's a huge story jump there, which to me, like, knowing that I think that all these characters are going to team up, my suspicion now is that like zombie Thanos is going to be like the big bad of the end of this series, some threat that like we're going to have to come back to, because it was so unsatisfyingly just dumped here. It makes me think that it's only there as a tease
Maybe it's
for
a two.
like what's
Maybe
going
it's
to
a
happen
two-parter.
next.
Maybe next week's episode will reveal it, right?
It's possible, but I think so many of these have been yeah, set up for a two-parter. Whether it's Sharon Carter going to the future or Peter Quill suddenly being awoken by Ego. It's there's whether they're all these villains that team up. All these threats still exist, and this just felt like a way for them to be like, okay, well, this story's not over, but we have to dump this villain in here so he can show up later, in another episode down the line. So at least that's the way I read it. But I thought it was really unsatisfying. And, this episode was just kind of like light fun compared to the others, which I think have been stronger, or like better explorations of Marvel continuity. But then for it to just end in this way, I found like, at least let me conclude the adventure. But I don't know. That's just me.
Jim McMahon says, I thought the zombies and Thanos were inside the Wakanda Dome. I think Thanos is definitely inside the Wakanda Dome, was my perception. I don't know about the zombies, though. There's a shot of, like, you see the force field in the zombies, and I don't know if they're inside or outside, but Thanos and some zombies are definitely inside the Wakanda Dome at the end, I think.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, it is a bummer that these episodes have mostly been like fairly self-contained until now, and now it's like, nope, there's another thing, or we're showing you this enigmatic thing. It reminded me very much of the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, which another Marvel thing has borrowed from this year that we have recapped, Dan Gvosden.
Well, to that point, did you see that the creators of Loki said that was their intention?
I thought it was their intention to not evoke that.
Oh, I thought I had read that their intention was to evoke that, but I could be wrong.
Let's see. Yeah, no, apparently I think you're right about that. According to slashfilm.com, yeah, and Screen Rant, Loki ending was inspired by Planet of the Apes and Twilight Zone. Okay, yeah, so, but yeah, this is kind of Planet of the Apes like as well, where it's like you see the thing that you saw before, but it's a little bit different, and we're not going to explain it at all. So, yeah. The Vicious Ocean says the implication is that Spider-Man and the crew are headed towards zombie Thanos. Is that true? Yeah. Because I thought that at the end he has all the stones, but maybe he only has 4 of the stones.
I need to go back and look, but everybody in the chat seems pretty certain that I misread this. So
let me check it. Let me check it right now. Let me check it right now. Yeah. Okay. So at the end, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I think no. People in the chat are wrong, because I'm gonna pull the image up right now, and if you look at the image, Thanos already has the. How many Infinity Stones are there? 6.
There's 5. Yeah, there's 6.
Okay, well, no, yeah, so maybe they're right. Maybe people in the chat are right then. It's because he has, at the end of the episode, he has 5 Infinity Stones.
Does he have the yellow one? That's the question.
He has a yellowish one. So there's one missing. So people in the chat thinks it's all the stones but the Mind Stone.
That would make sense, considering they're supposed to have the Mind Stone.
So then plot-wise, how did this happen? Like...
He's missing. It looks like he's missing the Soul Stone in that image. Oh no, the Soul Stone's on his thumb.
Right? No, the Time Stone's on his thumb, dude. Anyway,
that's what I mean. Sorry, the Soul Stone is on his pointer finger, but yeah, that is the Mind Stone that he's missing on the back of his palm.
Okay, so in that case, what are the plot machinations? Just we're completely off the script at this point. I was going to end the episode, but now we're just talking about this extremely geeky stuff. Yeah, but how did he get into the dome? So what would have had to have happened, right, for all this to happen? Like, I guess Strange would have had the Time Stone, and then, but then how did he get the Soul Stone, right? Like he.
Well, he could still take Gamora to the planet and sacrifice her.
Okay, I'm with
Right,
you.
right.
I'm
So
with
that
you.
would still
Yeah.
work. The Power Stone he gets off screen.
Right. He already got that at the like prior to the events of this episode, right?
Right.
And then
The Time Stone he gets from
he in the
Doctor
in
Strange.
Avengers Infinity War but then like but in the universe of this show, he would have fought Doctor Strange. Like Doctor Strange would be a zombie already, right? So
I
like
guess so.
so
Yeah.
maybe Doctor Strange just like coughs up the time stone right there, right?
I guess so. Your
Yeah.
guess is as good as mine. I'm like going cross-eyed now, and I'm like mixing up my colored
Yeah,
stones, and
Dan, you're completely falling apart right now.
I know this is terrible. Like I said at the beginning, I'm like a zombie.
So, okay, but I think it's conceivable that and then where did he get the reality stone from? The Collector, right? Am I remembering that right? In
Yes, he
Avengers
got it
Infinity
from the
War?
Collector. Correct.
So, I guess it's conceivable that zombie Thanos could have visited the Collector, or Thanos got the minds and then came to Earth. He got the reality stone and then came to Earth and then became a zombie. You know what I mean? Like that's all possible. So, okay, okay,
The implications of this are upsetting.
yeah,
Is
okay.
what
So
is
Jim
what I'm
McMahon
trying to
says
say.
Space Stone would let him teleport inside the dome. He was probably bitten while getting the time stone from Doctor Strange. Then his zombie nature kicks in and he goes to Wakanda to eat the last people. Okay, yeah, that's dude, Jim McMahon, amazing.
Hey, you know what? Invite Jim McMahon on the show instead.
Uh, all right. So Xinyu Zhang says, "Do you like the ending better now?" What do you think, Dan Glosson?
I still think it's really abrupt, but it's weird that I just maybe this is me that I didn't pick up on that kind of like film language that was connected in some way. But
I think because at the very end he holds up the gauntlet and like my initial read was, oh, he already has all the stones, right? But in fact he's missing the very big stone that they are coming to deliver to him. So
yeah, I think for me the throw off was I just felt like the scene before that shot just kind of like ended mid sentence. Like
right,
it
right.
was not a complete thought, and suddenly we're at this new image, and I'm having to process all this new information.
Yeah.
And I
Victor,
apologize for not watching it twice,
no,
but
no, 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 no. I mean, it's all good. We're just
yeah.
figuring it out. This is the kind we're doing this without a net, people. Victor DiGiovanni says the Mind Stone is the last stone he gets in both in this episode and in Infinity War. So
Right, from the Vision's head, where he plucks it out of his head.
right. Except now he doesn't have to pluck it. So
Well, now he's got to fight some Avengers for it, I guess.
I mean, still kind of an open question of how he even knew about Wakanda, or how he knew to get into Wakanda. But I guess he found Wakanda in Infinity War as well, so whatever. But okay, yeah, I appreciate the chat correcting us on this, and this is really useful information, and I feel silly that we missed it. But I would agree with you; it's still pretty abrupt, and it requires you to make a bunch of connections. But KS in the chat says, I think Marvel is just trying to be cheeky and to not read too much into it. So that's what KS thinks.
Well, it's funny. I would agree with KS, except for the fact that I think they've been really on top of making sure everything lines up so specifically in terms of their continuity. You know?
Right.
So, like my hat off to them. I think that they've done a really good job at that. Like, I think their story department is even more keen than the Star Wars, like, which has a much bigger story department in terms of keeping continuity straight. So, my hat is off to Marvel in that regard.
Let's end with this question. Zon Wedding in the chat says, what would zombie Thanos do with a complete gauntlet? Surely not kill half of his potential snacks.
Brains.
I think the question is, what do we see the people in this episode do as the zombie versions of themselves, right? Is they just try to achieve zombie ends, but with their existing powers.
I was waiting for a really bad pun to come out of your mouth right now, but it just didn't come there.
Mm-hmm. What would it have been?
Oh, I don't know what it would have been. That's why I was so excited, because you set up zombie ends, and then I thought you were going to flip it in some way to make a pun, but that never happened. So a little bit disappointed, David, but I can't do any better. So
indeed, zombies. Well, that ends well. Okay. Anyway, So yeah, I don't know what zombie Thanos would do. He'd probably snap it and eat all the brains, half the brains in the universe, right?
Right, that's his problem. Like his depopulation problem is just to eat half the universe.
Yes, yes, that's zombie Thanos' plan. So
But then he still has a consumption problem. There's not enough resources to go around to feed all the zombies.
indeed, indeed. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for us. This episode either proved the importance or complete disposability of our recap show about What If. But always grateful to have the chance to talk with you, Dan Gvozden. And again, if you want to listen to the podcast version of this, patreon.com/Dave Chen. Check out Dan's work at amazingspidertalk.com. Dan, thanks for joining me today.
What a way to go out on such an inane conversation. But you know what? I think that's what if demands. So I'm very happy to have been here for it. Thank you, David.
Thank you to all of our chat room people for your patience and for correcting us when we're wrong. We really appreciate it.